Hey guys, in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to make your own head pins. And the purpose of head pins, of course, is to help a bead, hold a bead in place to dangle off of something else. You can do all sorts of designs using head pins, like these earrings for example. Let's look at 3 different styles of head pins. The first is going to be for beads with fairly large holes. So, for instance, and also this works well with larger sizes of beads. So this bead has a pretty sizable hole. It's probably about, you could probably fit 18 gauge wire through there in fact, but I'm going to be using 20 gauge wire for this style. And of course you can use whatever type of wire you like, silver plated, sterling, aluminum. So again, I'm going to be using 20 gauge wire for this style. And I'm going to start by snipping off the end of this with my flush cutters so that I have a nice flat surface on the end. If you don't have flush cutters, you could also accomplish that simply by sanding it down. Then I'm going to take my round nose pliers and I'm going to grip this at the very end and make a tight loop. So I'm very simply turning it in upon itself to make a complete loop. Now the size of loop you make, again, depends on the size of your bead and the size of the hole in your bead. You want to make the loop big enough that the bead will catch on that loop and not fall off. So at this point, my loop is big enough, so I'm going to again insert my round nose pliers, and right at the end here, I'm just going to straighten the tail out. Just like so. And I'm going to snug that shut again with my chain nose pliers. Make sure everything is nice and straight. And very simply, you're pretty much done with your head pin at this point. Now you can just clip it off, leaving the amount of tail you need. And of course, the amount of tail depends on the size of your bead and what type of looping you want to do on the other end. If you want to be super safe and just make sure you have plenty of wire for whatever, probably a 2-inch tail will be very sufficient for anything you might need. So again, you're just going to snip it off, and then you can add your bead on the end, just like so. And there you have it, and you're ready to, you could make a wrapped loop at the top to attach this to something else, just like so. Or, you know, whatever your style might call for. Okay, so that is the very easiest style of head pin, just the simple wrapped loop. But there are certain situations where this would not work well. For instance, if you were using a stone with a very small hole. Gemstones and freshwater pearls are pretty notorious for having itsy bitty little holes that will usually only fit 26 or smaller gauge wire. Now the problem with this this wrapped loop style is if you go any thinner than 21 gauge, I would say, you carry the risk of it not being sturdy enough for this loop to hold if you were to pull on this bead, because of course the thinner wire will not be as strong. So in that case, if you have to use a thinner wire, there are a couple different options. And again, I would usually be doing like 26 gauge or smaller for these, but I'm going to use 24 just so you can maybe see a little bit better what I'm doing. So one option is to quite simply do exactly the same thing as we did for the simple loop, except we're going to go around twice. So I'm just going on the very tip end of my round nose pliers, and you can see I've wrapped it around twice now, just to give it some extra stability if you were to pull on the bead that were attached here. So now that I've gone around twice, I'm again just going to straighten out my wire and then I would trim it, leaving whatever tail I desired. Now, unfortunately, this style, again, is not 100% secure. This loop could theoretically unravel if something were to pull on it. So in that case, you would make what's called a knotted head pin. So very simply, the knotted head pin, you're going to take this double loop and you're going to cut off whatever length of tail you need. And again, 1.5 to 2 inches excuse me, is a pretty safe amount to make sure that you have enough, unless you're using a huge bead, you know, that should give you enough. Alright, so at this point I have cut off about a 2-inch tail, I have my double loop, and I'm going to reinsert my round nose pliers into that loop, and I'm going to take the tail straight up. So I just bend it straight up like so. And now, where the knotted part comes in, I'm going to insert this end down through there. So I'm just going to push that through, just like so. And then you can grab that with your pliers, and using your thumb and index finger, you can start pulling that through. And this will be easier to do again with 26 gauge or smaller wire. The 24 gauge is a little bit tough to be doing this. But then you just simply make it tighter with your pliers, just snugging everything up so that it's, you know, as small and dainty as you can get it. And if I had made my starting loops narrower, this would be working a little bit better. But again, just for viewing ability, so you can see what I'm doing, I made it a little bit larger. So you can see there we've made the knotted style head pin. And if I were to hang something on here, you can see it catches it quite nicely. So there you have it, our 3 different types of head pins for adding drop dangle beads on your designs. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Thank you for watching. I will be hopefully coming out with a project tutorial for a pair of earrings and pendant using drop dangles in the near future. So stay tuned for that. You can click the subscribe button if you want to make sure you don't miss that. And in the meantime, happy crafting!